One of the most interesting things to see in media, for me at least, is a redemption arc. Though I enjoy typical good guys doing good guy things, there's something so much more interesting about seeing a villain having a change of heart, and what's even more interesting is seeing a redemption arc unfold in real life, like in the form of CD Projekt Red for instance. For the past couple of years, CD Projekt Red have had their reputation somewhat tarnished, thanks to their failure to deliver Cyberpunk 2077, not just in the way they promised, but also just in a working state. When the game was released at the end of 2020, the game was unplayable for a lot of people, especially those who bought the game on last-gen consoles, God rest their souls. As expected, people were hurt by this betrayal, as up until that point CD Projekt Red always came across as an open and honest company that wanted to make great games. And while even back then I loved the game for its characters, plot, and music, the game clearly shouldn't have been launched in the state it was in. And CD Projekt Red knew this, offering refunds and apologising for their game that had more bugs in it than an ant colony. For many games and developers, this would have been the end of the line. All of that initial hard work quickly pissed away due to dumb decision making. Fans of everything Mike Pondsmith had created were losing hope that his amazing sci-fi ideas were never going to be fully realised in a crisp and clean way, and fans of CD Projekt Red were nervous that this sort of backlash would cause the company to shut up shop for good. And yet CD Projekt Red weren't ready to give up hope on this game that had been on their to-do list since 2013, and for the last 2.5 years they added patch after patch, getting the game to a better state each time. Things finally started looking good for Cyberpunk, but since that terrible release, the game had garnered a reputation for being unplayable, so it was going to take more than a couple of updates to get players interested in this mind-melting epic. But how do you convince people to come back to a game they already condemned?
Hey guys, massive legend here!
It was honestly a genius move to greenlight a TV show for Cyberpunk, because the game got carried by its story, characters, and music, and Edgerunners once again tells a thrilling and heartbreaking story, full of tragic characters, and has music ripped straight out of the game. The resurgence in Cyberpunk's popularity is thanks to this gem of a show. It was great seeing people finally acknowledge some of the brilliant elements Cyberpunk 2077 had to offer, like its memorable characters, interesting side quests, unique weapons, abilities, and an unforgettable setting in the form of Night City. The biggest changes to the game, however, came very recently with the latest 2.0 update and the long-awaited expansion, Phantom Liberty. 2.0 completely revamped a lot of the core gameplay of Cyberpunk, overhauling the skill trees, cyber implants, adding vehicle combat, and fixing the wanted system so police wouldn't just spawn out of thin air anymore, though I'm still a bit annoyed there's no micro-penis option. Whilst this was great at ironing out some of the game's flaws, Phantom Liberty was what many fans, including myself, had been waiting for. The expansion delves into a whole new storyline focusing around Songbird, a new character who tells V she can help them find a cure for the relic. Sounds simple enough, but this job takes V down a rabbit hole of espionage and betrayal inside of Cyberpunk's newest district, Dogtown. Though the offer is tempting for V, you have to be careful of who you trust in this strange and dangerous place, and whether or not the help offered to you really is the best alternative. I was incredibly hyped for this expansion, as I'm always looking for an excuse to jump back into Night City. The initial trailers looked great, and it seemed like CD Projekt Red really wanted this to work, since they got such a high-profile actor in Idris Elba, and after smashing the game once again for about 50 hours, the DLC was great. It completely surpassed my expectations, as although I did believe Phantom Liberty would have a good story, I didn't realise how much detail and dedication would go into this expansion. I thought it was just going to be a simple storyline addition, but it turned out to be so much more than that. Before I talk about Phantom Liberty, I should really talk about 2.0 a lot more, as it did overhaul a lot of the core mechanics and features of the base game. The most notorious change for everyone was probably the change to the wanted system. Early Cyberpunk 2077 was memed for how police officers would just spawn out of thin air, which really broke your immersion. The update thankfully made it so cop cars are patrolling naturally around the street, and when you do actually commit a crime, they will actively look for you, rather than just know exactly where you are. Progression is a big part of Cyberpunk's gameplay. Every time you level up, you can purchase perks and increase your skills to make V stronger in areas that can alter your gameplay style. Each tree helps cater to your personal tastes, and this aspect was changed in the 2.0 update. Certain perks that weren't very good were swapped out for more effective ones that actually push you to grind out to get them. Vehicle combat was also added to the game, which apparently the gangs of Night City are thrilled by, because they're always shooting the shit out of each other. Cyberware has also been slightly overhauled, and new implants have also been added, allowing you to experiment with different combinations and builds. You also sit in a chair when you get an implant. The gameplay of Cyberpunk was always the weakest aspect of the game for me. Don't get me wrong, it was fun, but when compared to the characters, story, and the god tier soundtrack, it felt a bit average. But overall, the gameplay feels a lot better. Despite these major updates, it's nice to see that Cyberpunk 2077 hasn't lost its identity, as it's still riddled with bugs, including one that completely breaks the game by having the relic malfunction effect last forever if you pick a specific line of dialogue after the clouds attack, which is probably the best new feature in the game by a mile. But enough about the basic stuff, it's time for the main attraction. When it comes to playing through the expansion, the game actually gives you the option to skip immediately to Phantom Liberty's beginning, but where's the fun in that? Yeah, I guess it's more convenient, but I found it better anticipating when I was going to get the mysterious call to introduce me to Dogtown, which comes after your meeting with the Voodoo Boys in the main storyline. Plus it just feels more natural and intriguing to have V receive a mysterious call when they are at a complete dead end in their journey, rather than them getting one whilst they're just chilling reading a book. Songbird calls you asking to meet outside of Dogtown's borders to talk about your problem, aka the unhinged rocker boy in your head. When you arrive at the meeting point, you immediately have a stroke, and Songbird appears to you in the form of an engram. This is when V discovers that Songbird is on board an aircraft with the president of the NUSA that's falling out of orbit and straight into Dogtown, and so V's first job is escorting President Myers to safety whilst fighting through waves of Barghest soldiers. Yeah, Dogtown doesn't fall under the same governing bodies as Night City. It's classed as its own district under the control of an ex-soldier called Hansen, who has since transformed it into its own untamable and chaotic playground where his soldiers rule with a neon green fist. After saving President Myers from several near-death experiences, you lose contact with Songbird, and so the president suggests that you hit up one of her old contacts who's stationed in Dogtown, a sleeper agent named Solomon Reed, aka Mr. Idris Elba himself.
Before we go,
and so you and Reed team up, a merc and a detective, crawling through the filth of Dogtown as you try to piece together what happened to Songbird. This leads to V becoming an honorary FIA agent, which of course Johnny detests, but needs must. V is running out of options to survive, and finding Songbird could be the only lifeline they've got. Songbird ends up getting captured by Hansen, which means V and Reed need to infiltrate a party to find out exactly what's happening, which is when Songbird reveals to V that Hansen has the key to cure both of them. Turns out Songbird is a powerful netrunner who's been exposed to the effects of the Black Wall, which is slowly killing her, and without access to the neural matrix, the Black Wall will eventually kill her and leave V up shit creek once again. And before I actually go into the spoilers of the game, I think I should talk more about the characters first. Phantom Liberty adds a whole new group of faces into the already huge roster of characters that reside in Night City. Many of them fall into typical character tropes, but even so, they still stand out as great fictional characters. Songbird is probably the most important and interesting character in the DLC, as the majority of the plot revolves around her and the many secrets she holds. Despite being a netrunner who works for the president, she comes across as an honest and caring person who holds a lot of grief for some of the hard decisions she's had to make over the years, and for the ones that she will make in the future. She's an intelligent and careful person, always trying to keep up a facade to everyone around her, which goes for V2 in some cases, as you discover throughout the runtime of the DLC. But under her intelligence and can-do attitude, she's also quite tragic, seemingly yearning for a life outside of the NUSA, shown by a conversation between her and V when talking about how young she was when she was recruited into their ranks. Another key player is Solomon Reed. Despite being a British man, Idris's performance as Reed I thought was great. Reed is very much the hard-boiled detective character trope synonymous with noir and spy stories. He comes across as a dedicated man of the law, wanting to do right by his country, and his personal stakes in the mission, being that Songbird is a close friend of his, makes his efforts to get the job done all the more desperate. Like Songbird, Reed is also a very sympathetic character, but for a whole different reason. Reed openly talks about how the NUSA betrayed him and essentially led him to his death, which was shown to us in the story teaser before the game was released. We also learn that it was Songbird who was instructed to pull the trigger, so to speak, which makes his motivations a little muddied. Does he really want to save Songbird, or is he trying to enact vengeance on her?
Why don't you just die?
Whereas Songbird is sympathetic because she wants to make a new life for herself, Reed's sympathetic because he seems to have given up on this dream of ever escaping the NUSA's watchful eye. He answers their beck and call despite what they have done to him in the past, which suggests that he has little hope for the future. These are the two main characters in the DLC, but there are plenty of other supporting characters who, although aren't as important to the story, still have their moments. Myers was a great supporting character, mostly because she was nothing like I imagined her to be. When it was revealed in the plot that V had to help save the president, I thought she was just going to act like every other political corpo we had dealt with in the main game, but rather than her being one way or the other, it's hard to tell what she's really like. At first, she seems friendly and talkative to V, despite them being a mercenary, but then you realise that Myers is nice to those who are useful to her, and she can be quite ruthless when she wants to be, which, depending on your choices, can either be a good thing or a bad thing. Alex is a close friend of Reed's, and is a fellow FIA agent working undercover in Dogtown. We meet Alex in her bar where she's been acting undercover for 7 years, after being trapped in Dogtown because of Reed's supposed death. Of course, she's pissed at Reed for lying the whole time, but warms up to the idea of helping him and V after she's promised a spy's retirement. Every big DLC needs a big bad, and in this case it's Hansen, who is the leader of Dogtown. His influence is visible throughout Dogtown, thanks to his own personal army acting as the judge, jury, and executioner. He comes across as a ruthless dictator, hiding his own guilty vision of power with a veil of protection for Dogtown and its people. Speaking of Dogtown, despite being part of Night City, it couldn't feel further apart from it. Night City is very much the embodiment of a dystopian future. It portrays a world where corporations have full control over everyone's lives, and the only way people can rise above their station is through crime. It reflects a world where it's easier to find a butt plug than a sandwich or a packet of crisps, and yet at the same time holds opportunities for those who know how to play their cards right, like fixers, rock stars, BD scrollers, mercs, and taxi AIs. But Dogtown feels like it reflects a whole different type of future. It's almost apocalyptic in the way its people live, and how the architecture is built. For the everyday person, living consists of staying inside of a small rectangular home, stacked on top of other rectangular homes, then either getting gunned down by local gangs, arrested by corrupt soldiers, or getting mugged by the local smackheads. Most buildings are old and decaying, left behind from a time long past, that now act as gang hideouts. Though there are some luxurious places to visit on your journey, the rest of Dogtown has been left to waste away. Rivaling gangs fight over control of loot, and seem to be even more aggressive than they are in Night City, again highlighting Dogtown's almost lawless state. It definitely shows off the darker side of the Cyberpunk universe, especially for the average person living in Night City that isn't covered head to toe in plot armor like V is. While Night City is at least pretty to look at, Dogtown is, well, how would you describe it, Alex?
Take you on a tour of NC's asswart.
Oh, fair enough. Despite not looking too pretty, Dogtown adds a lot to Cyberpunk, both old and new. The gangs of Night City offer some of the most memorable moments in the game, most notably ones like Maelstrom, the Tiger Claws, and the Animals, but the DLC tries to expand on those that were perhaps a bit hard done in the main game. The Voodoo Boys are one of the more interesting factions in the game due to their mysterious nature and their obsession with breaching the Black Wall, and yet we only get to spend one mission with them. Luckily, Phantom Liberty gives us more interaction with this mysterious gang, through optional combat and side gigs. Scavs also get a lot more attention in these side gigs, which feels appropriate as the creepiest gang in Night City, known for kidnapping people and cutting them up for their implants, would definitely hang out in a sketchy place like Dogtown. One of the more obscure surprises with the DLC came in the form of Mr. Hands. After not playing the game for like half a year, I'd forgotten some of the finer details in the game, but when talking to Mr. Hands, I couldn't help but feel like something was different about the character. I felt like I was going mad as I remembered Mr. Hands having quite a high-pitched and edgy personality, whereas the one I spoke to had a softer and almost calculated voice. That's when I discovered that they had switched out the voice actor. But regardless, I did enjoy Mr. Hands' involvement in the Phantom Liberty DLC. He's the one who hooks you up with side jobs and gigs throughout Dogtown, and actually comes across as quite an interesting individual. Not quite as interesting as Wakako or Rogue, but definitely better than Dino and El Capitan for sure. One of my bigger concerns for Phantom Liberty was whether or not it would actually feel connected to the base game. While I was always going to be happy with new Cyberpunk content, a worrying thought that crossed my mind was what if CD Projekt Red decided to keep the DLC separate from the base game, meaning that no new dialogue would be added for already established characters. While Johnny would obviously have new dialogue, I thought that maybe some other characters wouldn't get the same treatment, but thankfully new dialogue has been added to make the inclusion of Phantom Liberty feel natural. Some character interactions also got extended in the DLC, which really helped bridge the expansion and base game together. Lizzie Wizzy was one of the strangest NPCs in Cyberpunk 2077, and we get a chance to see her again in the Black Sapphire, and we also get a callback to a random throwaway line from the meeting with Wakako and Takamura, where we can speak to the comedian Takamura is mistaken for. It's little details like this that make a big difference, and make it feel like Dogtown was always in Cyberpunk. It's not even just throwaway dialogue or side characters, as some main characters even appear in Phantom Liberty's story, which I'll get into later. Some of Cyberpunk's best content comes in the form of its side quests, those gigs that on the surface don't seem important as they have no effect on the overall story of the game, and yet still manage to leave an impression on you, whether it's because of how thought-provoking they are, or maybe just because of how memorable the characters are, and Phantom Liberty has some interesting side gigs of its own. What's interesting is that many of them follow the same themes of the main Phantom Liberty story, as you are often investigating mysterious happenings and skulking through buildings to find dirty secrets, and at the end of them are often made to make a tough call. In true Cyberpunk fashion, some of these gigs reflect a twisted image of our own world, like when you find a secret underground club that makes money off what is essentially child labour, as kids are put through extensive training and operations to turn them into top tier athletes. And then you'll get ones that have a dark sense of humour, like the one where a guy thinks he's his favourite BD celebrity after a freak accident causes him to download her personality. Dogtown has its own unique personality too. Whilst most of Night City kind of blends together, Dogtown is so unhinged and weird thanks to its gigs, and many of the vendors around the town do a lot to sell the aesthetic. It's an even more dangerous place, where some of the most deplorable criminals reside, but hey, at least you can kill time on the dance floor. Now, let's get into the meat of the DLC. The story takes a dramatic turn once you enter Hansen's party, as Reed pieces together that Songbird was the one who brought down the transport carrying the president. This puts V in a tough spot, because you've agreed to help both Reed and Songbird, but since Songbird is now an enemy of the state for nearly getting the president killed, you as the player become conflicted on what to do. During the time Songbird was missing, V, Reed and Alex all grew closer with each other, as at this point you've been on a few missions. After being escorted out of the party by Hansen and his goons, you're left to think about what to do next. And honestly at this point I was kind of nervous for what was going to happen. You know that ultimately you can't please everybody. Somebody is going to get betrayed, and unfortunately it's you who has to make the final decision. Choice is a big part of Cyberpunk 2077's makeup. Many quests have varying outcomes depending on what choices you make, which gives the game tons of replayability, and Phantom Liberty continues to delve deep into this concept. Do you do the job you've been told to do and get Songbird back to the NUSA despite knowing that she'll never be able to leave again? Or do you keep your word with Songbird, as she might be the one able to save you? This decision is left to fester inside your head for several missions, all the while Johnny is calling you an idiot for even getting into this situation. In the meantime, V, Reed and Alex plan to infiltrate a meeting with Hansen and some netrunners after giving V an implant that gives you the ability to look and sound like a person of your choice. You meet these two netrunners at Hansen's party and have to strike up a conversation with them at a roulette table to get the necessary data to copy them, which is surprisingly difficult considering one of them doesn't feel like talking, probably upset because his sister doesn't shut the fuck up.
Shut the fuck up, you cunt!
After getting kicked out of the party, V, Reed and Alex then get to work figuring out how to find these netrunners so we can take their place in the meeting, and as this is going on, you have the option to talk to Songbird. During most interactions with Songbird, she's not there in person, rather she is projecting herself onto the relic, which definitely comes in handy with this specific conversation. It's at this point that Songbird admits that she was the one responsible for downing Myers' ship, and that her plan was to steal Hansen's AI matrix before it all went to shit. But everything eventually turns to shit for everyone in Night City, so now she has to improvise. Hansen believes he can use Songbird as a way to get the NUSA off of his back, as she has damning information that could lead to its downfall, not to mention that she is also one of the most powerful netrunners around. It's this mission that really sold Songbird's character for me, as her situation and attitude heavily mirrors that of V's. She's used as a tool by the NUSA, and this objective of trying to break through the Black Wall is slowly killing her. The old Songbird died a long time ago, just like how V did when confronting Dex for the final time, and like V, she is losing her sense of who she is.
A snowflake lands on my glove. I can calculate its unique fractal structure. But what did my mom's voice sound like?
She's willing to do anything and everything to live, and be free of anyone who is trying to control her. This is when she asks you to help her escape. Songbird knows that after Reed rescues her, she'll be sent back to Myers and punished for her betrayal. Songbird then reaffirms that she can help save your life, again splitting your mind on what is actually the right thing to do. She almost got the president killed, but then again she is essentially a slave for the NUSA and just wants to make her own choices. When eventually meeting back up with Reed and Alex, you manage to hijack the twins' car and get ready for the final meeting with Hanson. It's at this point the brutality of being a spy for the NUSA really shows itself.
Whoa. What in the fuck?
As both Alex and Reed execute the twins. Then you don your disguise, and this was probably one of my favourite missions in the game, just because of how trippy it is seeing yourself as a completely different character, and also because the game doesn't hold your hand during your interaction with Hanson. The goal is to make it seem like you are the real twins, and since Alex has been doing this identity theft thing for years, she knows how to copy someone's speech and personality, but you have to really concentrate on what's right to say and do. It rewards you for paying attention during your initial interaction with them. It's been a while since a game has made me nervous during an interaction with another character, but the performances from the voice actors and the great soundtrack really heighten the anxiety. You are then told to meet Songbird in the testing chamber, where you will then help her activate the Matrix. However, Hanson doesn't know just how bad things are going to go for him. You're then met with the ultimate decision. Do you help Songbird escape, or do you follow through with the mission and help Reed capture her? I decided to help Songbird escape, because I felt sorry for her and thought it would be interesting to see the two of you on the run together. After narrowly escaping with your lives, V and Songbird split up and lay low for a while, pondering what to do next. You then receive a call from Reed telling you that you fucked up, because you essentially just turned your back on your whole country. This makes it seem like you and Reed will have a final confrontation at some point, but for the time being, you're left to collect your thoughts and reflect on what happened. Then you get a call from Songbird. It's time to get out of Night City. Well, for Songbird it is. V's mission is to get her to the airport and send her to the moon, where a cure can be made. However, it's not as simple as grabbing her a ticket and sending her on her way. You've got to sneak past security and past the FIA, because you are now both criminals on the president's radar. After fighting your way through terminals and buildings, there's nowhere else for you to go. You're completely cornered, and with no other option, Songbird decides to unleash AIs from the Black Wall. This was a really powerful scene as it highlights just how dangerous Songbird is and why the NUSA are so determined to keep her in check. Then you make your way to the aircraft, and this is when Songbird decides to tell you that she was bullshitting. Just like that, all the hard work you put in for her was seemingly for nothing. Now at this point the game lays out some more options for you. Either you can carry on with your deal and send her to the moon, or you can call Reed and tell him where to find Songbird. And I was pretty pissed off at this point in the game, so I called Reed.
I forgive you. For stabbing me in the back!
So long as you ultimately decide to help Reed in capturing Songbird and ask for his help in curing V, you will unlock a brand new ending for the game, where the NUSA's top doctors will surgically remove the relic from your head, similar to the Devil ending. Depending on your relationship with Johnny when you decide to go through with this ending, he will have differing outlooks on the situation, and since my relationship wasn't too great with him, he laid into V for essentially killing him for a second time, as he will inevitably be destroyed in the procedure. Although it can end in a bittersweet way, as V and Johnny can acknowledge their respect for one another and ultimately decide to put their quarrying to rest, and then you're put under anaesthetic and awake in a hospital bed with Reed by your side. All seems well, the surgery was apparently a success and V will be able to live a long life, but the bad news is the surgery severely weakened V's ability to use combat implants, meaning firing up one would probably kill them, which also means that their life as a mercenary is essentially over. But it's not all bad, at least they can still live a long life. Well, it also turns out they've been in a coma for 2 years, so that's all of your friendships and potential relationship down the shitter. In fact, the only one that seems genuinely happy to hear from you is Vic, and he even asks you to come visit him. Whilst walking to his clinic, you get stopped by 2 NPCs who give you shit because they think you're not from around here. This is probably just a passing comment from them, but it really hits you hard. 2 years ago, V was arguably the most notorious merc in all of Night City, and now they're just seen as a nobody. It feels like you've just walked into an alternate reality, which is heightened by the fact that Vic is now working for a corporation. V gets beat up by these 2 goons, and Misty has drastically changed her appearance, now sporting Jackie's jacket, and is leaving Night City. And when you wave Misty goodbye, you melt into the crowd, becoming something that is way worse than dying, a generic NPC. Jokes aside, this ending really hits hard. It's one of those gaming moments where you sit in your chair as the credits roll, thinking about what you just saw. I really can't decide which is worse, this or the devil ending, because yeah, while V's life is a little bit more hopeful in this ending, everyone else's lives have gone to shit. At least in the devil ending, everyone still had a happy life, and it was just V's life who was affected by their shitty decisions. But despite the heartbreak, it's still a great ending to watch. It's one big callback to V's and Dex's first conversation about living a quiet life or going out in a blaze of glory, and if this is what a quiet life entails, then I'm not interested. Give me the Pan Am ending every day of the week.
Well,
It's perfect. All great, Pan Am.
Phantom Liberty exceeded every single one of my expectations, both narratively and in terms of content. It felt like I was playing Cyberpunk for the very first time again. I was immediately drawn into these new characters, plots, musical scores, and locations, and my only real criticism is that I wish there was more. It's even more devastating that this game won't receive any more expansions, but honestly the future looks bright for this series, and I'm glad that this amazing game finally got the recognition it deserved.